I should have bought an orange to peel for this, but eh. So, next up in my leaders slash rulers series, I'm going to be talking about Boodle, who is the mayor of Orangetown. Um, so, as I said, this is series me going through and talking about different rulers and leaders and stuff like that that we've interacted with in One Piece. First one was about Whoop Slap, considering we actually see a fair amount of him throughout the course of the series in regards to flashbacks with Luffy and updates in regards to what we see when we get, cut back to Fuchsia Village and kind of see how they're reacting to Luffy's progress. This one is about Boodle, who we've really only gotten a little bit about. We got the episode, the Orange Town arc, where we see Luffy and Nami and Zoro interact with Boodle. And then, jump forward a little bit, after the 2-year time skip, and we get a catch up there. But I still wanted to talk about Boodle because I like Boodle, and I think he's actually a pretty good guy. Most people think Boodle's a pretty good guy. So kind of the history that we get. I think we got a little bit more information about him in like some of the data books or something like that, or some of the question corner stuff that people asked Oda. So kind of the history that we get is that, first off, Boodle is 75 years old, unlike last week when I couldn't find an age for Whoop Slap because I couldn't. I double checked and it wasn't there. But Boodle is 75 years old. And about 42 years ago, Boodle, along with a bunch of other refugees from some unnamed other town that was destroyed by pirates, ended up in the Organ Islands, and they ended up building a new town that they named Orangetown. And Boodle, and through his leadership efforts and stuff like that, Boodle was proclaimed the mayor of the town. I'm assuming they still have like an election every couple of years and stuff like that, and Boodle maybe runs again and he keeps winning, either because nobody else runs or they're just like, yeah, you're just going to be mayor until either you die or until we find someone that's better for mayor or something like that. So we get that. We get that in the flash and some of the additional information. And then also we know that at some point in time, one of his friends, Hooker, who was the owner of the pet food store in town, that he unfortunately ended up passing away from an illness. And of course, his dog Chow Chow, awesome Chow Chow, love Chow Chow, stayed vigil sitting in front of the pet food store, waiting for him to come back, and Boodle would come and kind of feed Chow Chow and stuff like that to make sure that Chow Chow was okay. About 3 months after the death of Hooker is when the Buggy Pirates show up. And they start, causing a whole bunch of problems in town. They run the people out of town, and now they're in the woods where they're living. And Boodle ended up actually making himself an armor out of like different pots and pans and stuff like that. I debated about bringing some of our pots and pans upstairs, but I'm like, I really don't want to do that. And none of them even look like the right pots and pans that like Boodle would have used. He has like copper pots and pans is what it looks like that he uses to make his armor. We don't. So during that time frame when the town is being occupied by Buggy and his crew, he would sneak back into town. Boodle would sneak back into town to feed Chow Chow because, of course, the dog refused to leave when all the other refugees did, because he's, of course, Chow Chow still waiting for his owner. So after a short amount of time, I don't remember if we get an exact amount of time that the Buggy Pirates have been staying in Orangetown, but that's when Nami shows up because she wants to rob Buggy, rob him blind. And then, of course, Luffy ends up there via giant bird. And then Zoro, follows Luffy after kind of like coercing a bunch of Buggy's lackeys to take him to the town. So all three of them end up there. And one of the things that happens is, of course, Luffy gets put into the cage, Chow Chow eats the key, and we get kind of a bit of an introduction to Boodle because he shows up and is trying to feed Chow Chow. And this is when we get kind of this, interaction with Luffy and Zoro and Nami and stuff like that, where they're talking to Boodle, and he's explaining, what happened. Well, the buggy pirates showed up a little while ago, and now we've been having to deal with them, and they ran everybody out of town, and well, I'm the mayor of the town, and I kind of wanted to do what I could, and I couldn't really do very much because I can't really fight, but I kept coming back to feed Chow Chow and stuff like that. And in all honesty, he probably maybe like if someone really needed something out of the town, he probably went back and like tried to get it as best he could. Like if they need medicine, since they're kind of off living in like the woods around the island, which they've been there for like 42 years, so I'm sure there's people that are like well acquainted with the woods, but of course they generally do want to go back to their homes, but they can't because of all the buggy pirates, and of course Buggy keeps firing off his muggy balls or whatever they're called, keeps firing them off into town at times, particularly once he's trying to demonstrate how strong they are before they fire it at Luffy, who's trapped in the cage. So there's a little bit of okay, well, how are we going to make that work? We know that, so that's just not very good that the town keeps getting destroyed that way because of Buggy, and that's not helpful. And we know, I think it is eventually the pet food store does get blown up, because Buggy and Kabaji and Moji and Richie end up causing a lot of problems when they're running around town trying to get a hold of Luffy and Nami and Zoro and stuff like that. But Boodle's like, I really wanted to, find a way to help my town and fix things and everything. And at one point in time, Luffy Luffy gets bitten by Chow Chow, and Boodle ends up threatening Luffy and everything like that. I think Nami also ends up threatening Luffy at some point in time in this time frame, which, kind of just sticks with their general interactions with each other. Is just like, oh god, why am I dealing with this idiot? Nami, you're going to be feeling that way for a long time now, for a long time to come, so just get used to it. But Boodle tries to restrain Nami from trying to attack Luffy, and then of course Luffy I think Luffy fought against one of the buggy pirates because of the fact that they hurt the store. They blew up the store and everything, and Chow Chow's angry about that, so Luffy's kind of fighting to avenge Chow Chow in that regard. I had a whole video, or part of a video, where I talked about Chow Chow kind of being like an animal ally to the Straw Hats and stuff like that, even though he bit Luffy. Then again, a lot of the animals that kind of end up being allies to them later on somehow got into a fight with Luffy. And during that time frame, Boodle is gonna he's like, I'm sick and tired of everything that's going on here with Buggy and all of this, and they just destroyed my friend's pet food store and everything, and I'm gonna go and fight him. And Luffy just kind of punches Boodle, probably not anywhere near any of his strongest punches even at that point in time, but okay, I'm gonna punch you, old man, so you get knocked out, and so you're kind of out of the way. Because it's just if I knock you out, you're probably gonna be fine. If Buggy, if you try to go after Buggy, you're gonna get hurt really badly, and I really don't want that, because Luffy kind of likes Boodle at that point in time. I'm kind of wondering if Boodle reminds Luffy at all of Whoop Slap a little bit, in regards to the fact that they're both mayors of these little tiny forgotten towns. Maybe. That would make sense if that did end up happening, if there was some kind of well, someone asked, one of the Straw Hats asked Luffy, so why did you help the mayor guy? I was like, well, his town was in trouble, and he reminds me of the mayor from my town. He hit me a lot with his cane. Boodle didn't have a cane. I think Boodle had a spear or something like that. So, Luffy knocks Boodle out, and they kind of put him into a safe area, and while they're dealing with while they're trying to deal with Buggy and everything, Boodle, this Luffy interjecting actually kind of saved Boodle's life. Although Boodle did try to reject their outsider help and everything. And he's determined to fight against Buggy's crew, and I was like, you got guts there, Boodle, but if you try to do that, it's not going to end well. I can assure you of that, unfortunately. So they knock Boodle out and kind of put him over in a safer area, and then they eventually, the Straw Hats, beat Buggy's crew, you know, after a little bit of issue here and there and figuring out how Buggy's power works and everything. And of course, they defeat him and tie him up, tie up his body and his head and feet and hands get knocked into Kingdom Come and eventually land on Gaimon's Island. Eventually end up there. And then, of course, come back. But what ends up happening is, of course, the rest of the town comes back in because they kind of, see a bunch of the fighting that's going on. And they're coming in to, I believe, check on Boodle. And they get there and they're like, oh my God, what happened? And they see Boodle's knocked out and they see Chow Chow and they see Luffy and the others. And they assume that Luffy and the others are either working for Buggy or they're the ones that attacked Boodle, which I mean, technically Luffy is the one that knocked Boodle out, but it also ended up saving his life. So they're they start chasing Luffy and the others out of the town. And all of this commotion woke up Boodle. And he's like, wait, what do you mean you chased them out of town? And they're like, well, yeah, we had to because they're the ones that attacked you. And they're and they were causing a bunch of damage. And he's like, no, that's not what happens. And he starts running after the Straw Hats. And, Luffy and Nami and Zoro, they hop on their, two little dinghy boats that they kind of stole / commandeered / just had or whatever, and they're sailing off. And Luffy, of course, ends up leaving, I think it's 500,000 berry there. Some of Nami's stash there, leaves that there so that way they can use that to help rebuild the town. Which, I mean, that doesn't seem like very much now, given all the Straw Hats bounties and everything. That's not even, that's a small pittance of what Luffy's first bounty is with this 30 million berry bounty that he'll get in a couple of weeks. But, so that happens, and, Boodle's running after them and everything, and he ends up, declaring that, after what they did, that they don't have, that the people in town and him specifically don't have the right to hate the Straw Hats and everything. He's shouting at them his deepest thanks and everything, as they're departing. And then he, finds the money and they use that to help rebuild the town. During the, Buggy's Cruise Adventure Chronicles, where we're seeing, all of the other, where Buggy's off on his own and everything. We know that they have, that after the Straw Hats depart, that Boodle and Chow Chow and the rest of the townsfolk, drove off the rest of Buggy's crew and, run them out of Orange Town and everything. So that's nice there. So they were able to at least get rid of them. Admittedly, once Buggy's no longer around, the rest of the crew aren't exceedingly that much of a threat. I mean, they have a lion, but, you can easily distract Richie with food, and it's very simple to make him go away. Although I do kind of wonder if later on, if after Buggy, when Buggy is eventually because so I don't know if I mentioned this at all in anything else, but I do find it funny that when when everything's happening with Ace and Marineford and everything, that when that's getting broadcast everywhere, I don't think Orange Town would have necessarily been tuning in for that, but if they were, I'm sure that they probably would have been rooting for Luffy to save his brother once they saw Luffy there, or once any of that information was there, or when they read about it in the paper, they were maybe oh my God, that was the boy that helped us brother and everything like that, and he was just trying to save his brother. I wonder if because the Economic World Times or Journal or whatever it's called does end up out in the East Blue, because we see Fuchsia Village gets it, we see other places get it and everything, and we do see the Orange Town gets it. So I'm kind of wondering if I'm not saying Boodle went the route of Bartolomeo, where he has a shrine to the Straw Hats, but I'm wondering if Boodle and the rest of the town, they kind of whenever the new papers show up and the new bounties are posted, they recognize Nami and Zoro and Luffy and everything, and then maybe as the rest of the Straw Hats were, revealed for their bounties and everything, maybe they're like, oh, well, you know, maybe they have them. I made the joke in the Whoopslap video that like Whoopslap like takes some of the newspapers home after any information comes in about Luffy or Ace or whatever or Sabo, and like he like scrapbooks it or something like that. I can see Boodle being a little bit more likely to do that, but like maybe they keep some of that stuff as like, well, they're the ones that helped save our town and everything, and we know that we get like, because it's like we get like updates for like a good chunk of the East Blue throughout different times when we get like the decks of the world stuff, but we don't get any really updates for like the deck of the world stuff for Orange Town until like Fishman Island Saga, when we're going through that, when the Straw Hats are reuniting and everything at Sabaody, and then when they head down to Fishman Island. We don't really get any updates from that for the cover pages, or even just in catching up in general and stuff like that until then. And once we've hit there after the 2-year time skip, we see that the town has now mostly recovered and everything like that. Boodle and Chow Chow are, having this grand opening for the new pet food store and everything. And there's like a fountain in the middle of the street that's directly in front of where the pet food store is. And it's Chow Chow, and he's got a little straw hat on, which I find adorable. So there's that, and like Boodle sitting there reading the newspaper, and like we see the other guy. I don't remember what the other guy's name is. That's like Boodle's friend. He's one of the other like people that lives in town, and like is like, I think he's like one of the only other named characters that we get throughout the course of that arc. I do not remember what his name is though. I want to say like Pazu, but I don't think that's correct, or Posa or something like that. I think it starts with a P. I don't remember. But he'd been one of the ones that was Poro. Sorry, Poro. I was right. It started with a P. Poro. Because I remember that he's the one that like was one of the ones that like helped chase off the Straw Hats because he thought that they had hurt Boodle and everything like that, and then he got scolded by Boodle. I think he's also stated to be like one of Boodle's oldest friends, so like along with Hooker and stuff like that, had started the pet food store. So we see that Orange Town is doing much, much better, which is very good. And I don't think they would have been able to like hand in Buggy's bounty, because like the crew took Buggy's body with them when they left, which at least shows there's some form of loyalty to their captain. Took that with them when they left, and so they wouldn't have really been able to hand that into the Marines. I think that may have been one of their intentions at some point in time, where like Luffy and the others are like, oh well, they can hand Buggy into the Marines and get the bounty, and that'll go to the town. But that doesn't end up happening. We know that eventually they do end up using the money that Luffy left for them to help, with rebuilding the town and stuff like that. So that's good to know. They probably salvaged what they could and all of that stuff as well. So good there. But like I do kind of like the idea that like they kind of like kept an updates on what was going on with the Straw Hats, and like reading about all these other places. Or reading like whenever the Straw Hats got new bounties or got a new crew member or stuff like that, or read about that type of stuff. Because the thing is that Boodle was kind of one of these very early on people that had this interaction with the Straw Hats, where he saw that they weren't bad, that they weren't these ruthless, bloodthirsty, pillaging, burn your town to the ground type of pirates that like Buggy and his crew were, being. It's like if Luffy and the others had shown up in the Orange Island on, Orange Islands. That's in Pokemon, sorry, Oregon Islands, and ended up in Orange Town, and like Buggy and the crew hadn't have been there. Well, first of all, Nami wouldn't have been there in the first place, and then Zoro would have gotten completely lost trying to figure out where Luffy went in regards to like trying to follow the giant bird that grabbed Luffy. That whole fun bit. But the thing is that Boodle is one of these people that actually saw the way that the Straw Hats were. He saw that they helped his town, that they protected Chow Chow, that they, he understood that they knocked him out because, Luffy knocked him out because they didn't want Boodle to get hurt when, instead of him trying to go and fight Buggy. So he's kind of one of these people very early on that notices that there is this difference between these really bad pirates, or the more, okay, well, Buggy is not nearly as bad as a bunch of the other pirates we end up meeting later on, but still, in comparison, Buggy and his crew are the bad pirates in this comparison, and Luffy and his crew are the good pirates. And Boodle is kind of one of the first ones to witness this. And it's not like this, like, their interaction in, like, the Straw Hats interaction with Orangetown is not something that is, like, widely known. It's like what happened in Arlong Park is a little bit more widely known. And then, of course, what happened in Logtown is. And then subsequent other things that have happened and stuff like that through, like, stuff that happened on Alabasta, and then, of course, NS Lobby and Water 7 and all of that stuff. And then, of course, what happened in Sabaody. Like, a lot of that stuff, and Marineford and, and Dressrosa and stuff, like, those big moments are, like, known to the world, but, like, this is a small moment that really had an impact on this town and really had an impact on Boodle. And I would like to hope that I don't expect Luffy and the Straw Hats to ever show back up in Orangetown or anything like that. I don't think that would ever happen because, like, the last time they were there, they were getting chased out of town. Even if Boodle did show up at the dock and kind of like, thank you for helping our town and all of that. So I don't really know, what else would happen in that regard. I don't see them going back, but that would be kind of funny if they did. Chow Chow bite Luffy again. Actually, I think I mentioned this in the video where I was talking about some of the different like East Blue animal allies that the Straw Hats could have. But one of the things is that when Luffy and Nami and Zoro or whatever, where they're interacting with Chow Chow, and Chow Chow's just sitting there and, waiting, standing vigil outside of, the pet food store, that Luffy just kind of sits down next to Chow Chow and, like, he understands what the dog's going through, or, like, he understands why the dog's waiting or something like that. And I don't know if that's supposed to be like a exceedingly, exceedingly, exceedingly early reference to the voice of all things, but it could be. It very well could be a reference to that. I mean, we got technically the first reference to, like, Conqueror's Haki way back in the first chapter with Shanks. So Luffy having, like, this interaction with Chow Chow being exceedingly early reference to the voice of all things would make perfect sense. For Oda, like, retconning that or whatever into something. So there's that. There's that whole fun thing. But that's pretty much what I had about Boodle. I like him. I highly doubt beyond maybe, like, another update at some point in time. I don't expect us to get anything new with Boodle and Orangetown. I would like it if we did, even if it's just in one of the cover pages or something like that. I don't even think there's any, like, additional cover pages that they pop up in beyond when beyond like the cover page that they did that was part of the Decks of the World series, or in regards to the well, I know that Chow Chow made the top 100 poll. I know that because of course he did, because he's Chow Chow. I don't know where Boodle ended up in that regard. In that poll, I don't know what number he ended up at. But I find it really adorable that, like, I would like it if they ended up showing up again at some point in time, even if it's just in one of the cover pages for, like, one of the update things, where they, like what I was trying to get at earlier from one thing was, like, what was Boodle's reaction when he saw that Buggy was now a Shishibukai, or that Buggy was now an emperor, was now a Yonko? What was Boodle's reaction to that? Like, this is the weird clown that was in our town a couple of years ago, wasn't he? Yeah. And he's an emperor now. Yes. So is the rubber boy. Yeah, that one I can somewhat believe. But this guy here, the clown, I guess, and it's not like Boodle ever really saw that much of, like, Buggy making a fool of himself or anything like that. So, like, Boodle could still, I guess, believe it, but he kind of may also be on the skeptical side of things in that regard. There's that. But, like, what was Boodle's opinion of, like, I'm pretty sure he was probably, like, kind of proud of, like, watching what happened with Luffy and everything. And I don't even know if, like, their town would be affiliated with the world government. I mean, like, I highly doubt they would have the money to be able to, pay the celestial tribute or whatever, the heavenly tribute or whatever. So I would kind of assume they're not really associated with the world government or anything like that. So like maybe they were like rooting for Luffy when they heard about what happened to Ennis Lobby and the flag and everything, and him standing up to the Marines and all of that stuff. But I don't know. Not really too much else there, but I just like I want to know what Boodle's reaction was to stuff that's going on with Buggy. With like, oh no, he's a Shishibukai now, and now he's a warlord. Okay, then. I don't know. That's just funny thoughts that I've kind of had about that interaction there. So that's what I have there about Boodle. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. And I believe the next one up that I'll be talking about will be Wapol in his station as King of Drum Island, and then in regards to King of the Evil Black Drum Kingdom, and all of that fun stuff. So that'll be what I'll have there for the next video for this series. I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye. He knows this town better than anyone, but he also cares about the town more than anyone. Maybe too much.